calmed down with each other, and my crystal was born in 90 minutes.
Wow.
And I was actually AMA, advanced maternal age. I was 36, and that was considered advanced maternal age. And it was a very successful, very easy childbirth. I'm happy to say I had that beautiful experience of unassisted, non-medical, physiological birth in the bush. And so I continued working on that farm with the couple who was there. And then I went home for Christmas with my baby a year later. And my dad and my brother were very adamant that since I was so good at doing my own type of untrained massage, my brother at the time had a really bad backache and he was about to go for surgery at Mayo Clinic. And I said, why don't you let me just try while we're home for Christmas and see if I can help your backache? Well, it did. I have no idea what I did. I was untrained, but I was an intuitive body worker at that time. And then he and my dad got together like Italians do and insisted that I have to go to Chicago, where my brother lived as a bachelor. He would take care of us, and I would go to this college of naturopathy and get a PhD degree in body work. And so I did. And I went to Chicago then for 4 years to get my degree in naturopathy. But it was always in the back of my head to return to Belize. I loved the lifestyle. I really liked the year-round growing season. So I met my husband, Greg Shropshire, in class. He was in the same class as I at the college. And we were first study buddies. And then we became other buddies. And pretty soon we got married. And I told him that, I don't ever intend to live in America for various reasons. I want to live in the tropics. I want a year-round growing season. And eventually it came down to 3 reasons why I went to live in Belize: a year growing season, racial harmony, and medical freedom. This was in the 1980s. Now I graduated from the College of Naturopathy in 82. And at that time, the Federal Drug Administration had a very concerted effort to discourage natural healing, herbal remedies, massage therapy, acupuncture, homeopathy, whatever it was under great scrutiny by the FDA. And so at that time, people were actually going to jail, and the FBI was raiding the offices of herbalists, tearing up their records and throwing the herbs on the floor. And I just thought, that's not the environment I want to live and work in. All I want to do is help people. And the FDA actually said, if you tell people to drink more water for healing, we will come for you. That was practicing medicine without a license. So we went to Belize, and I contacted my friends, Mick and Lucy, my doula and midwife. And I said, we've graduated. We'd love to come to Belize, and please keep your eye out for a piece of land where maybe we could purchase and settle. And Mick wrote back and he said, Rose, there's a jolly piece of land right next to us. Of course, Mick is a British, and Lucy is from Toms River, New Jersey, Irish American. So I sent money, and we bought the land sight unseen, Chicago. I believed Mick when he said it was a jolly piece of land. It was on the river, and it was next to my best buddies. We shared the same fence line. So then Greg and I packed up in April of 82 and moved down to Belize. When we got there, we had 32 acres of uncleared jungle. And we had sent Mick money to clear a half acre and build a thatch hut where we could at least have a place to move into. And little by little, that over the years became a successful healing retreat center where we taught classes. The very first abdominal therapy class was taught there in 1992. Of course, I met Don Elijio in 1985, 3 years after we settled there. And then that was my 13-year apprenticeship. with him. But aside from my experience with Don Elijio, my husband and I had to tame 32 acres of jungle. We eventually cleared only 2 acres, and on those 2 acres, there were finally 11 little huts. And so people
And so
came.
you lived in there with no electricity, because I remember you saying you did all your studying at night, because in the rainforest, it gets dark at 6 o'clock or
6
something, doesn't
o'clock.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, we had no electricity. We had no running water for many years. I had a wooden sink, and the dishwater went out a hole in the sink into a bucket outside, and we emptied the bucket after every meal. And yes, I did most of my research during that time with a little plate on my chest and a candle on the plate and the book in front of the candle. There was no time to do research during the day because it was, literally, if you turned your back, the jungle came crawling into your room. There's Eva right next to me, and she knows that the jungle is voracious and vigorous. It will eat your home. In a matter of 3 months, it will be completely covered over with vines and jungle plants.
Wow. Wow. And so, yeah, there is no excuse. Rosita did all that research with a candle. And did you set fire to your hut ever? Did you manage to avoid that? Because that sounds like a fire hazard to me.
No, that never. What happened is we had our contract with the New York Botanical Garden to collect medicinal plants for cancer and AIDS research in Washington. After I wrote to Michael Ballack of the New York Botanical Garden, who I learned was an ethnobotanist. I had never heard the word ethnobotany before, which is the study of how people use plants and how plants relate to people. Especially cultural aspects of plant lore. And I said that I met this charming old Maya bush doctor, and I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to record. I felt like Don Elijio was a library of Maya medicine, and I felt like it should somehow be written down, recorded for the Maya people and for the world. And he was very excited when he got that letter. And in 3 weeks, he was on my doorstep.
Wow.
Because he told me that in botany, Belize was a gray area. There had never been a dedicated botanist to study medicinal plants in Belize before. And so this was his ballywick, Ballack's ballywick, we used to call it. And it gave him a great name in botany, that he was the first botanist in the 1980s, imagine that late, to be able to record 3,000 plants from Belize.
And these 3,000 plants were mainly shared with him by Don Elijio and other local herbalists?
All around the country. We made a concerted effort to contact herbalists or healers from all of the 9 cultures that live together in Belize. So I said racial harmony. For the most part, it's not 100% perfect, but for the most part, Belize does experience racial harmony. So we made a concerted effort to talk to the Garifuna people who were African descendants, to the Quechua Maya, the Mopan Maya, the Yucatec Maya, to the Black people who are the descendants of the African slaves during the British Empire, and then the East Indian people and other peoples from Central America, so that we could gather up the traditional healing knowledge of the nation, not only the Maya people.
Mm. And that knowledge is all held where today?
Well, it's in the book, Messages from the Gods. All that information, every bit of piece, every piece of knowledge, wisdom that we gathered from those healers is in Messages from the Gods. And in order to do a scientific book like that, every plant that you study must have a herbarium specimen. So something as simple as marigold, if I gather a bit of marigold and I brought it to Don Elijio and I would say, do you know the name of, and he would give me the Mayan name, Ishtipu, which means golden head goddess. I would write that down. Do you know any Spanish names? and he would tell me flor de muerto, flower of the dead. I would write that down. And then I would say, how do you use it? And he would give me all the different ways, spiritual healing, tummy aches, indigestion, anything that he could remember. And that was all written down as well. So in order to do that, you must have the plant specimen dried, connected to that information in a book. Your specimen has a number, and the details that you gather on that plant are in a book with that same number.
So how many of you were collecting this information? You and
me, my husband, and Michael Ballack. That's it.
the three of you.
A team of workers. We usually had 2 or 3 men working with us, climbing trees, pulling down vines, doing heavy work.
And then you wrote it all by hand. There was no computers, and then he had to take it all back to America.
Back to the New York Botanical Garden, where then it was processed by the employees of the garden. But it was a great service to Belize. And all that information is also held in Belmopan at the forestry department. So they have a herbarium specimen. When we collected, say, like the Mexican wild yam, very famous plant that gave the world cortisone and the birth control pill. That's a very hot item, and it only flowers once in 75 years. So we were able to find it on one expedition, which we did 9 years. Maybe we did 36 expeditions in 9 years. Tough bush work, hard work. So when we got the Mexican wild yam in flower, we would take 10 or 12 herbarium specimens. One went to London at Kew, one went to Germany in Berlin, another went to Prague in the Czech Republic. They go all around the world because botanists have agreed to share their herbarium specimens since World War II, when so many specimens were destroyed in Berlin, which was the storehouse of the world's herbarium specimens in Berlin. But and Kew as well, but so many were destroyed in the Second World War that then it was agreed that they would share specimens with all botanical gardens around the world. So never again would all of this be deposited in one basket.
How did Don Elijio react to this information being collected? What was his?
Yeah, he said he met Dr. Ballack, and I tried to explain my best, about Dr. Ballack and what is the botanical garden, a scientist, and he goes, so I guess you scientists aren't too dumb after all. That's what he said, right to his face.
Yeah, what an amazing piece of work that you started by just banging off a letter on your typewriter one day and
yes, on a typewriter.
Oblivion.
Yeah. And all this with no cell phones, no computers.
And learning it with a candle on your chest. Has anyone got any questions they would like to ask?
Louise has her hand up.
So I know that there was a lot of plants that were taken for, at that point, it was AIDS was the big illness that people were trying to find a cure. And I know that nothing necessarily came from that. But do you know what the next stage was with any of those samples? Were you ever kept in touch that, I don't know, apart from Mexican wild yam and cortisol and whatever, did anything come of anything?
Well, the other part of that story is the National Cancer Institute was looking for a compound in a medicinal plant that would kill the cancer cell. And our job specifically was to collect only medicinal plants in flower. If it's not in flower, you can't identify it. Another team had the assignment of collecting everything in flower, medicinal or not. They had better results. You know why? Because medicinal plants don't kill. You could, if you haven't take a medicinal plant into your system, how could it possibly do you good if it's going to kill cells? So consequently, of all the 3,000 plants that we collected and all of the laboratory work, bioassays, they made a tea from the plant, they made a tincture from the plant. And then there's these college students whose summer job is taking a little dropper bottle, dipping into the tea of the plant, and then putting 1 drop into 100 cells of cancer and 2 AIDS viruses. And then the same with the alcohol tincture, 1 dropper into every cell. And of all those plants, 1 was promising. I can't tell you what it is. It's against the law. I'd have to shoot you if I tell you. That's what we always say. It's a joke. So anyway, 1 plant of all of that research has shown some promise. And finally, what the Cancer Institute said is that the compounds in the plant are too complicated. And they are not able to figure out which of the 72 different compounds in that plant might be responsible for killing that cancer cell. And they said that it would be 20 years and $20 billion. But they are looking to synthesize a toxic drug.
Mhm.
And so I was happy to do the work because it was deep ethnobotanical research for the nation of Belize. But did I have any hope that they're going to find a cancer cure? Their cure is kill. You know, it's a very testosterone-driven medical system. Kill the cell, as opposed to our approach of strengthening the body so it can destroy the cells naturally through homeostasis. But that's not what the Cancer Institute, they were looking for a drug, and a drug that could eventually be profitable.
They wanted to isolate one specific bit.
One
Has anyone
specific.
else got a question they'd like to ask? Anyone else? Okay. You're all so quiet. So let's just go back to pinning Rosita then. Oh, Eva, are you asking a question, Eva, or are you just chatting to your people?
I'm just translating a few.
Oh, German. Oh,
Yeah.
German. Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Have your students got any questions they would like to ask?
Not right now, they're listening.
Okay. So Rosita, your herbal immersion course, what's going on? What are you doing there? Because you were saying that well, you decided a few years ago that you couldn't work with your hands anymore. So you're doing a lot of the water and wisdom work, but you're still doing your herbal courses and your herbal immersion classes. So what's your herbal immersion class look like?
Well, it's the same class that I did previously with Eva at Arco Iris farm. It's a week of immersing in the medicinal plants of Belize and the world. Very practical, learning how to make a tincture, poultices, cough syrup, herbal salve, and very practical skills to really take home. And we'll also do a forest bathing, and we'll do 1 spiritual bath. So it's a nice combination of physical and spiritual herbology. It's in December, and it's full.
Oh, well, tough.
Actually,
Tough, you can't go. And then
the waiting list.
you have your camps for the kids, which was, you had your dream about, Don Elijio asked you to take care of his people. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that. And
Sure. The very night that Don Elijio passed away in February of 1996, we had gone to the hospital to visit him. His grandson insisted that he go to the hospital. Don Elijio didn't want to go, but his grandson insisted that they take him to the hospital. And when we got there, the doctor said he had already had a stroke. It's 103. He said, look, your friend is brain dead. Take him home and let him die in his own village, in his own bed. So my husband, who's a paramedic, was able to hook up his IV, and we put him in the back seat of the truck, and I laid his head on my lap, and held him the whole almost probably 35 or 40 minutes drive from hospital to San Antonio. And then we put him into bed, and Greg again helped with all of the IV equipment. And then we decided we would go, because the drums began to beat in San Antonio, and the village was very, very hilly. So Don Elijio was down lower, so you could see all these hills around where people live. And it looked like rainbow strips coming down the hills where all the villagers were coming to gather. And it was just like flowing colors coming down the hillsides coming to gather around Don Elijio at his last moments. And Greg and I thought it best if we leave and come back in the morning. So I woke up at around 6 a.m. in the morning, sort of fell back asleep. And when I fell back asleep, this dream came to me in which Don Elijio was on the floor in front of our bed. We were staying overnight with the friend. He was on the floor and he was literally dying, taking his last deep breath and going, and he died. The moment he died, he got up. And when he got up, he was a young man. His skin had no wrinkles, beautiful copper color skin, thick black hair. And he sat down on the bed next to me. He put his arm around me, gave me a kiss. And he said, "Rosita, I love you." And I said, "Don Elijio, I love you too." Then he went like this with his hand, pointing to a corner of the room where on a stool was seated a little boy about 9 years old that I knew as Gonzalo. Gonzalo's face changed to Maria. Maria's face changed to Jose. Jose's face changed to Pablo. And Don Elijio said, "Take the children as though they were your own. Train them and teach them to help each other." And then I got up, we went to breakfast, and our host said, "Oh, we got a call from San Antonio. Don Elijio passed away at 6:10 this morning." So I feel like so honored that he made a beeline right to me, came to appear and gave his last instructions. And those instructions were to work with children. So Greg and I thought about that for a couple of years. What would be the best way to honor those last words? And then Michael Ballack came up with a contact of his who was looking for a way to give grants to people. The grant was called Man and the Land. And this family was looking for programs like ours, especially with children. So I wrote a proposal, sent it to the company that what we would like to do is to establish summer bush medicine camps for children. And in these camps, we would teach traditional healing and conservation and preservation of plants and the rainforest. And so they gave us our first grant of 10,000 US. And on that grant, we had our first 2-week summer bush medicine camp in the jungle, in tents. We cleared a little piece of land and had our first camp there. And that first camp was for troubled teenagers who had dropped out of school, just gotten out of jail, or their parents were in jail and they were kind of abandoned. So we took on 24 of those troubled teenagers.
24 troubled teenagers.
Teenagers
For 2
in the
weeks.
jungle, away from everything, away from marijuana, away from phones. There were no cell phones at that time. And so my favorite story at that time was we got a letter from an American general who had been in contact while he was in Belize with the American forces with a young man named Leroy. And he said, "I would love to send Leroy to this camp, but I think I should tell you, first of all, that he's dangerous and violent. But I really think he would benefit from something like this. But I need you to know ahead of time, I can't send him there unless you realize the risk." So we talked about it and we agreed we would except Leroy, who was 16. So Leroy shows up the first day and he's like 6'6", looks like a football player, and he's 16 years old. And so, of course, I was a little bit wary, keeping an eye on Leroy. Leroy was no trouble. At one point, we were sitting down at the table that we had built in the jungle, waiting for lunch. And he kind of nudged my elbow like this. And he said, "Miss Rosita, I want to show you something." And he brought out this notebook where he had been taking notes off television programs on the environment and the rainforest, writing down all this information on his own about the best way to preserve the rainforest, the names of local trees in Belize. I was so impressed. And then my last image of Leroy, what we had done in that camp was to transplant trees that Greg and I had rescued with these same campers. We all had rescued medicinal trees from areas that were being chopped down for housing developments. And we put them in bags in nurseries. Now they're 3 or 4 months later, and they've taken in the bags, and we're going to transplant them into this reserve of medicinal plants and trees. So we had a wheelbarrow, and the wheelbarrow every day used to be filled up with trees. And the kids would take the wheelbarrow down the trail that we blazed, and we'd plant the trees all around. So Leroy was in competition with everybody to see who could plant the most trees. Every day he won. And my last image is of Leroy coming back to camp with the wheelbarrow and 3 girls in the wheelbarrow. And the girls are all giggling and their legs are up in the air. Well, that was a complete turnaround for Leroy. When he came home he did not want to, nobody wanted to leave bush medicine camp. He wanted to live there. We'll make it. We'll be fine. Leave us here. Just leave us this and leave us that.
And these kids, that they come from Belize City and places, they'd come from
all from Belize City,
right.
basically the ghetto. These were Belizean ghetto kids, and they did not want to leave the rainforest and our little bush camp. So that was our first, and now just this past year, we had our 28th summer bush medicine camp, funded every year by the same family.
They still continue to put some money towards that camp.
It's made a very big impact on the nation of Belize. With so many children from all over the country come to study medicinal plants. But now since COVID, we found it was really difficult to keep 24 children apart. You have 6 tents, 4 in each tent. You wake up in the morning, there's 12 in one tent and 12 in the other tent. They sleep like puppies. So we decided we would focus on teachers. So this was the 4th year that we had the bush medicine camp for primary school teachers. And it's been a huge success, hoping that they will carry the message into the classroom. So thus far, the teachers have started medicinal plant clubs, medicinal plant gardens, and they've started girls' clubs about healing with natural therapies, especially around menstruation. So I think it's been a success all around, and we were able to honor Don Elijio's wishes.
And some of the tithes that come to you also go towards supporting these bush camps as well.
Yeah, the money that the family gives is never enough, but I always supplement with the tithes. Half the tithes go into the Eastchell Research Foundation that manages and operates the summer bush medicine camp and the scholarships. Every year we have one high school scholarship, and every year we look for people in medicine, nursing, or going for their MDs to help them out, maybe with living expenses or whatever we can.
So what a legacy that that meeting that you had that first day with Don Elijio to affect so many people around the world.
That he came to seek me out is especially moving. You remember the story, he was looking for linden flower tea to help him sleep since his wife passed away. And he would, when my wife was alive, all night long, kiss, 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 hug, hug, keep me warm. Now that my wife is gone, that blanket, if I turn around, it falls off the floor. My backside is cold. I miss my wife. That blanket is no good. I need my blanket of guts.
So one of the other stories that I always love to hear you talking about is when you were going to stay with Don Elijio each week, you'd go for 1 or 2 nights. And he always insisted on having all the windows closed. So you must have been cooking in that little hut every night.
Absolutely super. He was very afraid of the viento de la noche, the night winds. He said the night winds were the most dangerous because it's the jungle. They carry dampness and cold. And that if you've been hot all day long, which of course most of the time we are in Belize, your pores are open from perspiration. And we know it's true because the body will try to cool you down by homeostasis by opening the pores, perspiring and cooling down the surface. And then at nighttime, if you allow the cold, wet breeze to come in the windows, you get what most people know as wind invasion or mal viento, a bad wind. He was quite superstitious about that, and not that it was only a physical harm, but it could also do spiritual harm. That on the night wind were carried many evil spirits. So doors and windows had to be closed, and sometimes it was still 80 or 90 degrees at nighttime in that environment. And it's just what it was. The worst, that wasn't so bad. The worst thing was that the outhouse was downwind. I don't know why he ever built it in that position, but there it was. And every time a breeze came, there was that. Yeah.
Mandy asked a question. Is there any special person that you can remember or think of who has received one of those scholarships for the nursing or the medical training?
Yes, I do. I remember one single mother in Belize City. She was the single mother of 2 children with special needs. She wanted to be a nurse, and she could never gather enough funds together because of her, very expensive medical costs for her 2 children with special needs. So she had done so well. She had gotten herself through 2 years lumping along, but it took her 5 years to do 2 years of medical school. Now she was about to finish, and it was at a time in her life where she just could not muster up the funds any longer. So we helped her to the finish line. Yeah. That to me was very moving. I always have a place in my heart for single mothers. I was a single mother for years, and I know what a struggle it is, and how you do your best to maintain a household and keep up a standard of living, and that it's hard.
Okay, thank you. So let's we're coming to the top of the hour. Let's anyone who wants to unmute themselves and ask a question or share a thought or tell us about something that's going on in your working life that you'd like a little thought about.
Any clinical questions? We're here.
Any question? Rosita, what's your favorite color? Oh, it's red.
Can you tell? Yes. Red. I actually thought I would never like gray, but when you have white hair, gray is actually rather attractive. So
I've started
like
wearing navy blue.
Red and bright pink. I look at my closet and almost everything is blue. So it must be blue. But I think that when you have a favorite color, that's the color in your aura that you're attracted to. So I feel like my aura must be very blue because that's the color I wear almost all the time. But if you ask me what my favorite is, I'd say red and bright pink.
Okay. So
come on. Nothing else, no comments, no questions, nothing to say. Yes.
Come on, Susie.
I am curious about whether you ever heard from Leroy again.
I did. You know how I
Mm.
heard from Leroy again? I had checked into a hotel, and
Mm.
the lad who checked me in at the desk, he had a proper, lovely job. And he said, Miss Rosita, do you remember me? And I looked at him and I sort of, and he said, I'm Leroy, with his last name. And I tell you, he came around and we gave each other such a hug. People in the lobby were applauding. It was just the warmest greeting, the sweetest hug. And yes, it was divine to see that he pulled his life together, finished high school. He's fine. And he
Good
did say
question,
that
Susie.
that
I was
changed his
wondering
life,
that.
that our faith in him changed his
Mhm.
life.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Louise?
Okay.
Rosita, I think you've been doing some exhibitions, or there was a tour or something around Belize that you were did you do recently or within the last few years? I saw photographs of you in front of a lectern somewhere in Belize.
Oh, that would have been the graduation of the pharmacy school. And they asked me to do a keynote speech. So I gave a speech on medicinal plants of Belize that have brought modern drugs to medicine that came from plant sources in Belize. That one program was very successful. We toured the country doing traditional healing workshops. And the motto was, if you know, come to teach. If you've always wanted to know, come to learn. So we traditional healers from all different districts. So there was one traditional healers conference in every district, and invited all the healers to come to share, to get to know each other. What are your major problems? I mean, how could the government assist you? And so that was very successful program. And that was funded by USAID, United States Aid for International Development.
Okay.
You've been amazing over the years, Rosita, at finding little pots of funding from hither and thither.
With a lot of help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else got a question they'd like to ask? I've been getting some new stories.
I'm just a bit, the thing that really got me was a rabbit had to die to find out.
Really? Can we talk about that a bit more? A rabbit had to die. What?
I believe it's because of the hormones, particularly the HCG. You know, that human choreographic gonadotropin, HCG. That's the one that killed the rabbits.
So were you injecting? So what happened? Were you peeing
You
on
took
the
a blood
rabbit?
test. You went to a lab, you took a blood test, and they injected your blood into a rabbit in the back.
Wow.
So everywhere had a ton of rabbits out the back.
Yeah.
So you didn't pee on a stick?
Pardon?
You didn't pee on a stick?
Yeah.
I never thought about it. That's just how it was done.
Wow.
So
I mean, I remember that. Yeah.
You
You
do?
remember that, Beth?
Yeah. My girlfriends, we would, I didn't have to do it, but my girlfriend did.
So did you know that was how people got, did you know that, okay, I'm going to try and find if I'm pregnant, but a rabbit's going to have to die for this?
Yeah, we did know, because
know.
One of the gossip
It was
would
a
be,
joke, right?
the rabbit died, which means she was pregnant when they got married or something like that. Well, the rabbit died.
Wow.
Whoa.
Gosh, how times change, eh?
How times change.
I have never heard that.
Never heard that.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of the time you just kind of you just knew you were pregnant because 2-3 months had passed and you were just working on the assumption. But if you were having to know quick, then you went and killed the rabbit.
I had to know because I had to make a life.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared to wait 3 months.
Yeah.
By the time I knew I was pregnant, I was probably maybe, 7, 8, 10 days pregnant. By the time I was 6 weeks pregnant, I went to Belize. I was
Yeah.
already landed and I already had a life laid out for myself, and I was prepared to do whatever. Nothing
Yeah.
felt like it was too much. And I have to say that those 3 years in that hut with just me and my little baby were the happiest of my life.
Mm,
There was nothing to do but take care of a baby and
mm,
make meals and keep the garden.
mm. Beth?
No
Well-
electricity, no running water, no. It was, but I had the other couple who were on the farm. Couldn't have done that all by myself. Yuli built that house for me, and then we were companions and we lived there together because we had both worked for the same person at the Shangri-La Institute in Florida. So
Mm.
I also had a great deal of support and assistance.
Mm. Beth?
I just wanted to speak to our time together in class, Rosita. You had an answer and a story for every question. And the last question of our group had to do with our working the colon, your beautiful constipation move. But one of the people in the class was asking about tapeworm and how to get rid of tapeworm. And there you were with the with a great story so I just thought, wouldn't it be lovely for you to just share that, because your experience is just amazing.
It's a lovely but a gross story.
It is, but I love gross
Yeah.
stories.
Before I went to Belize, I had that job as health director, first assistant health director, then health director at this fasting institute, water only fasting institute. My job was taking care of people during their water fasting and then preparing their menus to break the fast. Fasting is one thing, breaking a fast is an altogether different situation. It has to be done with scientific care. So one of the ladies who came to fast for, I think it was 10 or 12 days, had a tapeworm that she just couldn't get rid of. And she had studied Dr. Herbert Shelton's book, who recommended that she go fast for 10 or 12 days. She didn't want to do it alone. So she came to the Shangri-La and signed herself in. And then I saw her the very next day in the office, and I guided her through this fast for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, she could feel the worm moving inside. And I just got in my intuition. And my intuition said, get something and put it in her mouth. So I had a piece of garlic. I don't know why I chose the garlic, but I did. Put a piece of garlic in her mouth, and I said, just bite down on this. And I tell you, this is the absolute truth. That tapeworm came right up to her mouth, and we pulled it out. I'd say it
Wow.
was about, I don't know, I remember it was enormously and flat and ugly. They're so ugly, these things. It was about 5 feet long,
Wow.
but done in 12 days, done and dusted.
Translate that into German, Eva. Eva's translating all of this into German. Okay.
Yeah.
Beth,
So I just
please.
want to do one more plug on the working the colon, and you're looking at the anterior sacral scarring and how we can affect that as well. Do you remember?
Yeah, the sacrum is also, the sacral work is also a very big piece of the ATP plus, which is what we just don't have time to go into in ATP 2. But the deep, more advanced sacral work is very super dynamic and makes all the difference to people who have chronic low backache and people who are going into labor and birth, because many times their sacrum has been injured from falls or kicks or car accidents, things like that. And they go into labor with an insufficient space in their pelvic floor for the baby's head to turn around and come through the vaginal canal. And those are the failure to descend births, and that usually end in cesarean. sometimes death of mother or death of the baby. So yeah, it's super important work, and I would like to see every pregnant woman in our hands get that work before she goes into childbirth. I've had fabulous results and success. And that's one aspect of our work that nobody taught me. Yes, it's based on nephropathy, but I had to figure it out because most of my clientele were women in childbearing years who had as many as 18 children, as you know, because of the Mennonite population. And when I found out that they had really long 36, 42-hour labors, I had to do something. I had to figure it out. And what I figured out is that the sacrum had been, from a blow, an injury of some sort, the sacrum had gone, the whole sacrum anterior. And that left less room in the pelvic floor for the baby's head to turn and come out. And it's by 2 centimeters. 2 centimeter shift in the sacrum into the pelvic bowl will affect childbirth, where it could be 90 minutes or it could be 42 hours.
Amazing. Okay, well, it is Mandy.
Just one question on building on that, Rosita. So the ATP plus work would be applied as part of our supporting fertility before you get pregnant. And then we would go into the pregnancy protocols once conception. But hopefully that ATP plus work with our 1 and 2 is going to get you in the right place to have as best a delivery as Source wills you.
Of course, it's best to do before pregnancy, but it can be done during pregnancy as well. Sometimes we help a woman with a fertility challenge by correcting her sacral anomalies or injuries. So we do both. We help her with her fertility, and then we help her have a healthy pregnancy and a reasonably easy childbirth, a physiological birth.
Wonderful.
Good
That was-
job, Mary. That was lovely.
That was really
It was
nice.
beautiful.